everything. There comes a moment in every person's life when achievement stops feeling like a distant dream and starts looking like a map, something you can actually follow. Not luck, not talent, everything, not fate, but a clear path made of choices, discipline, and direction. This audiobook exists for that moment. Because once you understand where success truly comes from, everything, achievement becomes predictable, and your future becomes something you can design, not just hope for. When you begin any journey that truly matters, everything, there is a subtle but powerful moment when something inside you shifts. It usually doesn't happen with fireworks or fanfare. More often, it happens quietly, almost privately, everything, like a realization that whispers rather than shouts. It's the moment you stop asking whether achievement is possible for someone like you, everything, and you start recognizing that achievement is a direction, a series of steps you can choose, one decision at a time. Before any real progress is made, achievement begins in the mind, everything, long before it ever appears in your life, and that is why clarity matters more than we often admit. Clarity is the first line on the map. Without it, days pass, weeks drift, everything, and months turn into years without ever becoming anything meaningful. But when you finally see where you want to go, everything that once felt random suddenly has purpose, everything. People often assume that successful individuals simply had more confidence or more opportunity or even more talent, but those assumptions overlook the foundation. They had clarity first, everything. When you know what you want, life becomes navigable. You start noticing choices you never paid attention to. You begin to see opportunities you used to walk past, everything. You realize that achievement isn't built overnight, but direction is chosen in a single moment. Imagine someone driving on a highway with no destination. They might be moving, everything, but they're not truly going anywhere. Progress requires direction, and direction begins with understanding what you're actually aiming at, everything. You've probably had moments when life felt busy, but not purposeful. Perhaps you worked hard, but you couldn't quite explain what all that effort was building toward, everything. This is one of the most common experiences people share. They are working, striving, doing their best, yet something still feels unclear. Like moving through fog, everything, like running without knowing the finish line. And when life feels directionless, motivation becomes fragile, everything. That is why so many people start things enthusiastically and then stop when obstacles appear. It's not the obstacle that defeated them, it's the lack of clarity behind their effort, everything. When the why is unclear, the smallest inconvenience feels like a reason to quit. But when the destination matters deeply, everything, challenges become part of the road rather than a reason to turn around. Think about a time when you were unquestionably determined to do something, perhaps learning a skill, everything, completing a task or overcoming a personal struggle. The challenge didn't disappear, but your commitment transformed how you experienced that challenge. Difficulty felt different, everything. It wasn't discouraging, it was shaping you. That is the feeling clarity gives you. Clarity turns difficulty into growth. And this is not just inspiring language, everything. It is the mechanics of human motivation. When you know exactly what you want and why you want it, your brain begins filtering decisions, noticing opportunities, everything, and redirecting your energy toward alignment. You stop wasting so much time wondering, and you begin investing that time building everything. So ask yourself a question that most people never pause long enough to consider: what do you actually want? Not what others think you should want, not what your environment suggests, everything. Not what feels safe or predictable, but what your inner voice keeps repeating when the noise of the world gets quiet. Some people discover they want financial independence, everything. Others want emotional peace or professional excellence or meaningful contribution. There is no requirement that your goal must impress others, everything. The purpose of clarity isn't to create something glamorous, but something personally meaningful enough to commit yourself to, everything. Achievement becomes powerful only when it is aligned with your truth. Otherwise, success feels empty and progress feels forced. When clarity enters your life, everything, you also begin noticing what does not belong. You stop accepting distractions disguised as responsibilities. You begin recognizing what drains your energy and what expands it. Suddenly, everything, your time becomes deliberate. You choose relationships that support your growth, not those that merely entertain your boredom, everything. You start developing habits that lead forward instead of holding you in place. Clarity doesn't just tell you what to do, it quietly teaches you what to stop doing. And surprisingly, everything. The act of letting go becomes as important as the act of pursuing. Only when you stop walking in the wrong direction do you begin moving in the right one. Everything. A person without clarity looks for motivation, but a person with clarity creates it. Everything. There is a difference between trying to feel motivated and having a reason so strong that motivation follows automatically. For example, everything. Someone who vaguely wants to do better financially rarely sustains effort, but someone who decides with clarity that they want to change their family's future, everything, or create a life with freedom instead of fear, will find motivation inside difficulties. Their why is bigger than the discomfort. This is why some people persist when others quit. Everything. They are not stronger, they are clearer. Consider a young professional who feels stuck, bouncing between jobs without direction, frustrated because nothing feels right. Everything. They might think they lack opportunity, but perhaps what they lack is clarity. When they eventually decide what industry they want to master, what skills they want to develop, everything, and what long-term picture they want to build, everything changes. Suddenly, every job becomes a stepping stone. Every skill becomes an investment. Every challenge becomes experience. Everything. What once looked like a dead end becomes part of a growing blueprint. That single shift, from accidental living to intentional direction, becomes the turning point. Everything. Now imagine yourself years from today looking back. What would you be proud of? What would matter? What would make you grateful that you started earlier and stayed consistent? Everything. Those questions aren't philosophical, they are directional. When you answer them honestly, you begin shaping the map of achievement. Not a fantasy, not a vague dream, everything, but a practical destination. And that destination gives meaning to your present efforts. You start realizing that today is part of a bigger picture, everything. That even your current challenges are preparing you for a future version of yourself you haven't met yet. Clarity is not a lightning strike. It rarely arrives all at once. Everything. Sometimes clarity starts as a whisper, a gentle idea, a growing curiosity. It unfolds, it strengthens, it sharpens over time. But even the smallest moment of recognition, this is what I want, everything, can change your direction forever. Achievement becomes less overwhelming because you're no longer trying to do everything. You're doing what aligns. And alignment is powerful. Everything. Alignment is momentum. Alignment removes resistance. Before long, progress stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like a natural consequence of clarity. Everything. When clarity becomes the foundation, something beautiful happens emotionally. The future no longer feels uncertain in a frightening way. It begins to feel open, expansive, everything, ready for you to step into. You start looking at tomorrow with anticipation instead of doubt. Everything. The world feels less like a place you must survive and more like a landscape you are meant to explore. And in that shift, achievement feels less like chasing and more like becoming. Everything. Every decision shapes the path. Every moment becomes meaningful. You aren't drifting through life anymore, you're designing it. There is a part of achievement that few people talk about, everything. Yet almost every successful individual quietly understands. It's the space between starting and succeeding, where enthusiasm begins to fade and reality starts asking hard questions. Everything. It's the place where doubt whispers louder than motivation and where progress feels painfully slow. This is the territory where most people quit, not because they are incapable, everything, but because they don't realize that this difficult stretch is exactly where strength is built. When you decide you won't quit, something powerful begins to shift inside you, everything. You start to understand that achievement isn't only a matter of talent or opportunity, everything, but a matter of creating a mindset that refuses to stop moving forward even when everything feels uncertain. Think about any great achievement in history. Behind it, everything. There is always a moment where the person involved could have turned around and walked away. They could have given into frustration, fear, or exhaustion. But they didn't. Everything. They endured long enough to reach the point where momentum finally met preparation. It might look like courage from the outside, but internally, everything. It was often nothing more than a small decision repeated over and over again. Not today. I will not quit today. That single thought, reinforced again and again, becomes a kind of inner armor. Everything. It protects your focus, strengthens your belief, and teaches you how to continue even when your feelings want to stop. Everything. Achievement requires an internal identity that sees difficulty not as a full stop, but as a signal that you're progressing through territory most people never dare enter. Everything. Every challenge is proof that you're stretching into the future you want. Every setback is evidence that you're engaging with life rather than passively watching it pass by. Everything. The truth is that pressure is not the enemy. Pressure is a sign that growth is happening. When you feel pressure, it means you're moving into something bigger than your comfort zone, everything. And that is exactly where transformation begins. Perhaps you remember a time in your life when you attempted something new, and at first it felt exciting, almost effortless, everything. But eventually you reached a point where the excitement faded, and suddenly it felt difficult. Most people misinterpret this moment. They believe something must be wrong, everything, or that they must not be capable enough. But this moment is not a sign of failure. It's a milestone. It's the transition from dreaming into doing. Dreams are easy in the imagination, everything. Reality asks for persistence. When you reach that point, remind yourself that discomfort is not a warning. It's confirmation that the process is working, everything. Imagine a runner halfway through a race. Their legs ache, their breathing is heavy, and it would be easier to walk than keep running. But every experienced runner knows the pain is temporary, everything. If they keep moving even slowly, something will eventually shift inside their body. The pain reduces, energy returns, and a rhythm forms again. That is the nature of progress, everything. It tests you first, then rewards you after. But the reward is invisible to anyone who stops too early. Resilience is built through repetition, everything. You don't become mentally strong through easy days. You become mentally strong through the days when continuing feels like a choice instead of a habit. Every time you keep going, everything, you are teaching your mind a new pattern. I can handle this. I can keep moving. This is how belief is built, not by avoiding struggle, but by walking through it and realizing you survived. Everything. Eventually, the mind stops fearing difficulty because it has enough evidence that you can rise above it. There will be moments when the process feels slower than you expected. Everything. There will be days where you question the path entirely, but growth rarely happens at the speed we want. It happens at the speed we are ready for. Everything. Some lessons need time to settle inside you before progress becomes visible outside you. When nothing seems to be changing, something is always changing inside you. Everything. Progress often begins internally before the world ever sees the results. Think about the seed buried in soil. For weeks, nothing seems to be happening. There is no plant, no growth, everything, just darkness and waiting. But underneath the soil, roots are forming, strength is developing, and a foundation is being created, everything. Only after that hidden development does the plant finally break through the surface. In life, you are often in a season of roots. You might not see change yet, but you are preparing for it, everything. Mental strength is that hidden root system. It develops quietly, silently, and steadily until eventually it becomes impossible to ignore. Every time you push through fear, everything. Every time you stay committed, you are creating a mindset that refuses to quit. And the incredible thing about a mindset like this is that it doesn't rely on emotion. Emotion fluctuates, everything. Motivation rises and falls, but belief is deeper. Belief becomes a commitment. A promise you make to yourself that regardless of how uncertain the day feels, you will continue the journey. Everything. A resilient mindset understands that feelings are temporary, but results are permanent. Some people wait to feel confident before they begin. Everything. But confidence is something that grows only after you start. You don't wait for confidence, you build it through repeated action. The first step is always awkward. Everything. The early attempts are always imperfect. But every step forward, no matter how small, builds a sense of self-trust. And the moment you begin trusting yourself, everything. Quitting becomes less of an option, because you start believing that your future deserves the effort you're investing today. Everything. One of the most powerful shifts in mindset happens when you stop seeing obstacles as interruptions and start seeing them as the path itself. Every person you admire, everything. Every story of success you've ever heard is a story filled with difficulties. Successful people don't reach their destination because everything worked perfectly. Everything. They succeed because they learned how to keep going when everything looked impossible. They didn't escape struggle, they mastered it. If you want to develop a mindset that cannot be shaken, everything, start treating challenges as training. Just like muscles grow when they're pushed beyond comfort, your mindset grows when it's stretched by difficulty. When something gets hard, everything. Instead of asking why it's happening, start asking what it's teaching you. Instead of thinking something is blocking your path, start recognizing that it is shaping your character. Everything. The more you shift your interpretation of difficulty, the more powerful you become. There's a simple truth about achievement. Everything you want is on the other side of continuing. Everything. Not perfection, not certainty, continuing. You don't have to know how the entire journey will unfold. You only need to keep moving one step at a time. Everything. Most people quit not because they're incapable, but because they misunderstand the process. They expect results too quickly. They expect progress to grow in a straight line. Everything. But progress rarely looks linear. It's full of pauses, setbacks, leaps forward, and moments that appear to stand still. But those pauses are temporary. If you keep going, everything. Momentum always returns. When you feel overwhelmed, slow down, but don't stop. When you feel anxious, breathe, but don't quit. When you feel discouraged, remind yourself of why you started. Everything. Progress doesn't require perfection, it requires persistence. The mindset that refuses to quit is not loud or dramatic. It isn't about bursts of motivation. It's quiet, steady, everything, and stubborn in the best possible way. It's the inner voice saying, "This is hard, but I continue. This feels uncertain, but I continue. I don't know exactly how this will unfold, everything, but I continue." With time, something remarkable happens. The things that used to intimidate you become ordinary. The fears that once controlled you begin to shrink. Everything. What was once difficult becomes part of your strength, and slowly, almost without noticing, you become someone who doesn't break under pressure, but grows because of it. Everything. You start turning obstacles into momentum. You turn pressure into fuel. You become the kind of person success naturally finds. Everything. Because success rewards those who refuse to stop walking toward it. Consistency is a quiet force. It rarely feels dramatic in the moment. It rarely feels powerful when you're doing it. Everything. In fact, most days it feels uneventful and sometimes even boring. But if you look closely at every person who has built something meaningful in their life, everything, you'll notice a predictable pattern. These small daily actions, repeated with commitment, slowly transform into extraordinary progress. Most people don't fail because they aren't capable. Everything. They fail because they underestimate how far consistent effort can take them, especially when the results are not instantly visible. Everything. Think about the last time you started something with enthusiasm. Maybe a workout routine, a reading habit, a new business idea. In the beginning, there's energy, there's excitement, everything. You feel ready. But then life happens. Work becomes stressful. The excitement fades. One skipped day turns into 3. And eventually, everything. You're left wondering why this always happens and why progress feels so hard to maintain. The truth isn't that you lack discipline. It's that human beings naturally seek immediate reward. Everything. And consistency rarely gives that reward right away. The real victories of consistency don't show up today. They reveal themselves months from now, or even years later. Everything. Imagine planting a seed. You water it every day, but for a long time nothing appears to be happening. The soil looks the same. The seed looks like it has disappeared, but beneath the soil, everything. Hidden from view, roots are forming. A foundation is being built. And one day, something breaks through the surface, not because of one big effort, but because of dozens of small, everything. Patient actions that eventually accumulated. That is exactly how progress works in your life. Everything. One of the most damaging beliefs we carry is the idea that success is the result of intensity instead of consistency. You don't need to work 12 hours a day to change your life. Everything. You don't need to start with something overwhelming. In fact, most of the time, big intense efforts burn out fast, while small habits continue moving forward. If you walk 1 mile a day, everything, it won't impress anyone today. But in a year, that simple action adds up to 365 miles, and in 2 years it becomes 730 miles. That is the power of the small and steady approach. Everything. But consistency doesn't only build skills, it also builds identity. Every day you show up, even for a few minutes, you are proving something to yourself. Everything. You are reinforcing the belief that you can follow through. You are shaping the story you tell yourself about who you are. Everything. When you start seeing yourself as someone who practices daily improvement, even in small ways, progress begins to feel natural instead of forced. Everything. There is a man I once met who wanted to become a writer, but he had a full-time job, a family, and very little free time. Instead of trying to write a chapter every weekend, everything, which he realized he would always postpone, he wrote for 15 minutes a day, sometimes less. He didn't publish anything for 2 years. 2 full years of what felt like very slow progress. Everything. But eventually, he finished his book. The surprising thing wasn't the book itself, it was the writer he became in the process. Today, writing is simply who he is. Everything. And it all started from small daily commitments rather than massive, impossible plans. Consistency teaches you patience. It teaches you to trust the process. Everything. And it teaches you that your future is not shaped by single dramatic moments, but by the repeated decisions you make every day. Even if those decisions seem tiny, everything, they carry long-term direction. Every day becomes a vote for the person you want to become, and the more votes you cast, the stronger that identity becomes. But let's be honest, everything, being consistent is not always easy. There will be days when you feel tired, unmotivated, or discouraged. There will be moments when progress feels invisible. Everything. This is where most people give up. But consistency becomes much easier when you stop expecting motivation to do the work for you. Motivation is a feeling. It comes and goes. But systems, everything. Habits and routines don't rely on motivation. They rely on structure. When something becomes part of your routine, it takes less mental energy. You don't think about whether to do it. Everything. You simply do it because that's who you are. This is why the goal should never be perfection. It should be continuation. Missing one day doesn't matter. Missing 3 days doesn't matter. Everything. What matters is your ability to resume. Consistency is not the absence of interruption. It is the refusal to quit. A person who starts again is still progressing. Everything. A person who returns after a break is still moving forward. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to keep coming back. Everything. Another myth about consistency is that it has to be painful to be valuable. The truth is the opposite. Sustainable consistency is built through gentle, manageable actions. Everything. If you push yourself to exhaustion every time, progress turns into punishment, and anything that feels like punishment becomes something you eventually avoid. Instead, everything. Think about building a rhythm that feels natural. A rhythm that supports your life, not one that fights against it. For example, if you want to read more, everything. Don't start by forcing yourself to read for an hour a day. Start with 10 minutes. If you want to exercise more, don't start with long workouts. Start with something you can maintain. Everything, even on your busiest days. Because the real power lies in the repetition. Every day you complete the action, you are carving a path in your mind, making the behavior easier next time. Everything. This is how habits are formed, through small, consistent action that becomes automatic. And here is something many people don't realize: consistency protects your energy. Everything. When your progress is steady, you don't swing between extremes of too much effort and total burnout. You don't overwhelm yourself one week and quit the next. Instead, everything. You build momentum that feels calm, steady, and sustainable. When momentum is steady, progress begins to feel effortless. Not because effort disappears, but because effort becomes familiar. Everything. There will be times when external results don't match your internal effort. Those are the most dangerous moments. That is when doubt appears. Everything. That is when you start comparing yourself to others. That is when impatience starts whispering that maybe all this effort isn't working. But remember this: everything. Progress is rarely visible while it is happening. Most breakthroughs only become visible in hindsight. You don't notice the inches until they add up to miles. Everything. Your job is not to rush the result. Your job is to keep moving. Your job is to keep showing up, even on the slow days, even on the unmotivated days, even when you feel uncertain. Everything. Because the breakthrough you want is already building itself underneath the surface. And one day, just like that seed finally pushing through the soil, your progress will make itself visible. Everything. It may surprise you to know that the most successful people in the world don't necessarily work harder than everyone else. They simply keep going longer than most people are willing to. Everything. They keep practicing, keep refining, keep adjusting. They are not always extraordinary. They are simply consistent enough that extraordinary things eventually happen. Everything. So I want you to think about one thing you wish to improve in your life. Something simple. Maybe it's your health, your finances, your mindset, or your daily habits. Everything. Now imagine doing one small action every day related to that goal. Not something overwhelming, just something realistic that you can repeat. Everything. Imagine yourself continuing that action for the next 6 months. Not perfectly, just consistently. Can you picture how much progress that would create? Everything. Can you picture how different your life might feel? This is how transformation really happens. Step by step, repetition by repetition, day by day. Not because you made one huge change, everything, but because you allowed small improvements to compound over time. Every small step matters. Every small step adds up. Every small step carries you forward. And eventually, everything. Those steps build a new path, leading you toward a version of yourself that you always knew was possible, but finally began to see forming in front of you through your daily commitment. Everything. When most people think about achieving a big goal, they imagine an overwhelming mountain of tasks, responsibilities, and constant effort. They assume success comes from doing everything, working nonstop, and staying busy every minute of the day. But what most achievers eventually discover is that achievement is not about filling your calendar. It's about directing your energy. It's about choosing intentionally instead of reacting automatically. Because the truth is, you don't need to do more. You need to do what actually matters, everything. Imagine a person who wakes up every morning determined to make progress, but without a plan. They jump from task to task, handle every message, respond to every request, everything, and then collapse into bed every night feeling exhausted, yet strangely unaccomplished. They weren't lazy, and they weren't lacking ambition, everything. They simply didn't choose what to give their attention to. And attention is the real currency of progress. What you focus on grows. What you ignore fades. Everything. Strategic action begins with recognizing this simple truth. There were two young entrepreneurs I once met who started their businesses around the same time. Both were passionate, driven, everything, and full of ideas. One of them spent every week building new products, trying new marketing tricks, switching strategies constantly, and always feeling behind, everything. The other spent most of her time studying what actually worked in her field, paying attention to the patterns, asking questions, and focusing on just one solution at a time, everything. The first person worked harder, but the second person worked smarter. And within a year, her business wasn't just slightly ahead, it had multiplied far beyond what anyone expected, everything. Not because she did everything, but because she understood the power of strategic action. Strategic action means zooming out long enough to see the bigger picture, everything, and zooming in long enough to take meaningful steps. It means asking, before you take action, a question we rarely pause to ask what matters most right now. You see, everything. Achievement doesn't come from movement alone. It comes from purposeful movement. The world is full of busy people who aren't going anywhere. They're busy doing tasks that don't create change, everything, solving problems that aren't important, and putting out fires that will reignite tomorrow, everything. Strategic achievers learn to identify which actions actually move them closer to their destination and which ones are simply noise along the way, everything. Think for a moment about the goals that mean the most to you. Whether it's building financial security, improving your health, deepening relationships, or growing your skills, everything. There are thousands of actions you could take, but only a few of them will truly shift your life. A person who wants to get healthier could spend hours researching fitness routines, everything, watching videos and reading articles, yet nothing changes unless they decide which one routine they will actually commit to. Success doesn't come from endless options, everything. It comes from chosen focus. There's a story about an archer who was considered the best in his country. People believed he had perfect vision, steady hands, and an extraordinary gift, everything. But when someone asked him what made him so skilled, he simply said, "I never aim at everything. I only aim at one thing." That is the spirit of strategic action. You choose your target, everything. You draw your energy toward that single direction, and you reduce the noise around you. But this is not just about choosing the right actions. It's also about choosing the right time, everything. Some actions matter only when taken at a specific moment. Think about planting seeds. If you plant them at the wrong season, your effort is wasted, no matter how good your technique is, everything. In achievement, timing matters just as much as effort. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is wait, learn, and prepare until the timing aligns with your strategy. Waiting isn't weakness, everything. Often it's wisdom. A powerful part of mastering strategic action is learning to separate the urgent from the important. Urgent things demand your attention, everything. But important things deserve your attention. Many people spend most of their life doing urgent things, responding instantly to every call, every notification, every request from others, everything. Meanwhile, the important things, building skills, improving their future, developing discipline, investing in themselves, everything, are postponed until there's more time later. But later never arrives automatically. You have to choose it intentionally. Imagine your life like a map, everything. Every action is a road that leads somewhere. Some roads lead forward. Some lead sideways. Some lead nowhere at all. Every time you say yes to something, you say no to something else. Everything. If you say yes to distraction, you say no to progress. If you say yes to someone's request that doesn't align with your purpose, you say no to your goal. Everything. Strategic action is the courage to choose the right yes and the right no. And yes, this requires confidence. It requires believing that your time deserves protection, everything, that your goals deserve priority, and that your future deserves respect. Most people don't fail because their dream was too big. They fail because their days were too small. Everything. Their daily choices were not aligned with the future they wanted. But you can change that the moment you begin choosing with intention. A simple rule can transform your progress. Everything. Do fewer things, but do them deeply. Focused action always outperforms scattered effort. If you take one powerful action every day that moves you closer to your goal, everything, at the end of a year you will be transformed. That is the compounding effect of strategic choices. A person who writes 1 page a day can complete a book in a year. Everything. A person who saves a small amount every month can build wealth over time. A person who exercises 20 minutes a day can transform their body within months. It's not about intensity, everything. It's about consistency applied to the right things. Strategic action also requires self-honesty. Sometimes the reason we avoid important actions is because they challenge us. Everything. They make us uncomfortable. They require growth. It is easier to stay busy with tasks that make us feel productive than to face the actions that actually move us forward. Everything. Growth isn't always comfortable, but it is always worth it. Ask yourself regularly, am I doing this because it truly matters or because it feels easy? Everything. One of the strongest skills you can develop is the ability to pause before acting, to ask yourself what outcome you are trying to create. Everything. To evaluate whether this action brings you closer to that outcome or distracts you from it. If the action aligns, commit to it. If it doesn't, release it. Everything. This simple habit can save years of effort and frustration. And here's the empowering part: you don't need perfect clarity to take strategic action. Everything. You only need enough clarity to choose the next meaningful step. Many people wait for a perfect plan before beginning. But strategy is not built once, it evolves. You learn by moving forward. Everything. By paying attention to results, by adjusting along the way. Strategic achievers don't wait for certainty. They move forward with intention and refine their path as they learn. Everything. Think of your path like climbing a mountain. You don't need to see the whole summit before taking your next step. You only need to see where to place your foot today. With each step, everything. Your vision expands. The higher you go, the more you can see. Achievement works the same way. The more progress you make, the clearer your map becomes. Everything. Strategic action gives you another gift: confidence. The moment your actions begin to align with your goals, you start to feel in control again. Everything. You stop feeling overwhelmed by life and start feeling like a designer of your direction. Decisions become easier, priorities become clearer, and progress feels more natural. Everything. You no longer wonder if you're doing enough. You know you're doing what matters. There will always be distractions, opinions, and temptations pulling you in different directions. Everything. But every time you return your focus to what truly matters, you reclaim ownership of your future. Your life becomes guided not by reaction, but by intention. Everything. And once you begin living with intention, achievement stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like a natural result of who you are becoming. Everything. There's a quiet turning point in every person's journey where success stops feeling like something they are chasing and begins to feel like something that simply gravitates toward them. Everything. It doesn't happen suddenly, and it rarely arrives with fireworks or applause. It unfolds through an accumulation of choices, a slow shift in identity. Everything. And a steady acceptance that you are no longer trying to become successful, you are becoming someone success would naturally follow. That shift, that internal transformation, everything, is the difference between temporary achievements and lifelong momentum. Many people spend years searching for shortcuts and instructions. Everything. Never realizing the most powerful transformation isn't external at all, it's who you are becoming on the inside. Because when success becomes part of who you are, everything, achieving it becomes the natural outcome of the lifestyle you've built. You can observe this change in people who once struggled. They talk differently. They carry themselves differently. Everything. They treat challenges as normal parts of their journey instead of personal threats. They make decisions based on where they're going, not on where they've been. Everything. There's a calm confidence that replaces the old pressure to prove themselves. They don't chase validation anymore, they express purpose. And the world responds to them differently. Everything. Sometimes without them even trying. Opportunities begin finding them. People begin trusting them. Doors open because people sense who they are. Everything. They've crossed a threshold most people never reach. They've become the kind of person aligned with success, rather than someone performing success temporarily. Everything. But identity doesn't change by accident. It changes through repeated signals you send to yourself about who you are becoming. Think about someone who starts running every morning. Everything. In the beginning, they don't feel like a runner. They feel like someone trying to run. But every morning run sends a message. This is who I am now. Eventually, everything. The habit turns into identity. They don't force themselves anymore. They simply wake up and run because runners run. In the same way, success isn't about forcing discipline forever. Everything. It's about building a life where discipline becomes part of your self-image. You don't need willpower every moment. Everything. You become someone who does the things successful people do almost automatically because it feels natural, like breathing. Everything. If we look at the difference between people who rise steadily and those who only achieve occasionally, it isn't talent, it isn't luck, it's alignment. Their actions, beliefs, standards, everything, habits, environment, and identity are all pulling in the same direction. Most people live in conflict with themselves. They want success but carry beliefs that contradict that desire. Everything. They want progress but maintain habits that slow them down. They want to grow but surround themselves with people who stay the same. Everything. You can't become the person success follows if you're constantly reinforcing the identity of someone success would avoid. So the moment you begin changing the way you see yourself, everything else begins changing too. You start holding yourself to better standards. You choose better conversations. You invest energy into things that actually lead somewhere. Everything. You give less attention to distractions because distractions no longer feel part of your story. You upgrade your self-respect, and success grows from the soil of self-respect. Everything. When a person respects themselves, they naturally make choices aligned with their goals. They protect their priorities. They say no with more confidence. Everything. And they stop tolerating versions of life that shrink them. One of the most powerful shifts happens when you stop apologizing for wanting more. Everything. Some people shrink their dreams because the world seems more comfortable with smallness. But when you become the person success follows, you no longer adjust yourself downward. Everything. You adjust your environment upward. Consider someone who once struggled financially, constantly reacting to bills, debts, and emergencies. Then something changes. Everything. They stop seeing money as something that controls them and begin seeing it as something they can learn, guide, and grow. They adopt the identity of a financially disciplined person. Slowly, everything. Their spending decisions shift. They learn, they plan, they save, they invest. The results don't appear instantly, but the identity becomes deeper each day, and eventually, everything. Opportunities come their way that never existed before. That's what becoming the person success follows looks like. It's not just what you do. It's who you believe yourself to be. Everything. But here's the part most people overlook: identity is strengthened through action, not thought alone. You can affirm positivity all day, but without behavior, identity remains weak. Everything. Action is identity practice. Every time you choose growth over comfort, every time you commit when quitting feels easier, every time you make a decision aligned with your future self, everything. You're stamping that identity deeper with permanent ink. And slowly, life stops feeling like a fight and begins feeling like something unfolding through alignment. Everything. One of the most liberating realizations is that you don't need to prove anything to anyone except the person you are becoming. Success in its purest form is private first. Everything. The world sees the results later. People often ask successful individuals what changed, expecting a single moment, a single breakthrough, or a secret solution. Everything. But those individuals know the truth. The real change was silent and internal. The world only saw the final version of the transformation that began quietly long before. Everything. Think about the times in your life when you've surprised yourself. When you achieved something you once thought was impossible, something that once intimidated you. In those moments, everything. You didn't just accomplish something, you rewrote what was possible for you. And once your identity expands, it never fully shrinks back to its previous size. Even if life slows, everything. Even if circumstances challenge you, you now know that you are capable of becoming more. The memory of that proven potential becomes part of your identity, and it stays with you. Sometimes, everything. Becoming the person success follows means letting go of older versions of yourself. The version that needed approval. The version that second-guessed every decision. Everything. The version that believed success belonged to other people. Those versions served you once, but they were only designed for the chapters you've already lived. Everything. You're heading into a chapter those old identities are not equipped for. Growth requires release, and release requires trust. Everything. Trust in the fact that the future version of you is capable of more than the past version ever imagined. You might notice that once you begin becoming this person, certain things that once excited you become less meaningful. Quick wins, shallow validation, temporary comfort, they lose power over you because you're thinking long-term now. Everything. You're designing a lifetime, not chasing a moment. And instead of seeking approval, you begin seeking alignment with your purpose. Everything. You're no longer impressed by things that used to distract you because you've tasted progress, clarity, and direction. Everything. And nothing feels better than knowing you're moving forward intentionally. When success becomes part of your identity, everything. Setbacks stop being evidence of failure and start being lessons for refinement. Challenges become calibration, not defeat. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "Everything. How do I grow because of this?" That single shift changes everything. Because success is less about avoiding difficulty and more about evolving through it. Everything. Every challenge becomes part of the story you're building, not a reason to step backwards. The beautiful part is that identity-driven success becomes a self-renewing cycle. Everything. The more aligned you become, the easier progress feels. The easier progress feels, the more you commit. The more you commit, the more capable you believe yourself to be. Everything. And the more capable you feel, the more possibilities open. Achievement becomes less of a climb and more of a natural expansion of who you already are. Everything. That's why this chapter matters so deeply. Because once success becomes part of your identity, the journey doesn't end, it evolves. It accelerates, it compounds. Everything. And the person you are becoming is only just beginning to discover what's truly possible next.